Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. Now, before we get into details about the show, we are a radio station in Los Angeles, California, and unfortunately we've had a pretty disastrous couple of days here with Pacific Palisades, Pasadena, and Sylmar, and multiple locations having severe fires. People that I know have lost their homes. And so, I don't want to do a moment of silence, but I do want to, respect everyone that's been going through this tough experience before we begin our show. So we're just going to give like a 10-second moment of silence, and we're going to get right into the show. Okay, we're back. So, having said all that, we've been doing this radio show, the Ask Brien radio show. Our first live episode on AM and FM radio was back in January 2017. That means we're 8 years old. Wow, 8 years. Long time. So, I don't know what that means, but someone's going. Anyway, 8 years we've been doing the show, and 2025, we're starting again, going 8 to 9 will be this year. Everybody has always asked why Ask Brien is spelled with an E. Why is the show called ASK BRIEN when our co-host is Tracy and the host is Peter? Why are we spelling Brien with an E? Because everybody knows that Brien is spelled BRYAN and BRIAN, but nobody spells the name BRIEN. Unless, where are they from, Tracy?
Yeah, I'm not giving the plug for the Irish pub today. That is not feeling that.
Well, we already got that.
That's your.
That's the O'Briens.
Yes, exactly. No, I have several other amazing reasons why Ask Brien is spelled with an E, but you can have that one.
Just as long as I get a beer with you. All right, so without any further ado, ADIEU, and I love that word because it has mostly vowels in it, just one consonant, if people even remember what those means anymore. All right, Tracy, so explain to our audience why we're spelling Brien with an E.
Well, Peter, thank you. I normally would applaud, and I will always applaud our engineer, Jen, as one of the...
You better.
One of the
if you want to keep the show going.
Yeah, no kidding. If I want to keep the show going. But I feel it's on my heart today to really start out with one of the E's we do talk a lot about, and I know you have a resistance to on a lot of occasions, but today we all have a lot of empathy going on for everything that is happening to our family, our friends, our business partners, our clients, everybody that's being affected by the fires in Los Angeles. So we're just going to resonate today's E as a capital E for empathy, and really just sending out so many big love, hugs, prayers, all the things. And yes, but that doesn't discount, Jen. You're always the most amazing engineer, for sure.
Thank you. Well, I'm in good company, so thank you.
I felt like you would be willing to give up your number one slot for today.
I certainly would.
Well, where's the cheer thing? Where's that cheer thing?
I did it. I didn't. I already did it. Yeah. Now you missed the moment, Peter. It's got to happen now. It's already.
And then
passed.
even though it doesn't start with an E, Jen has a lot of humility, so she's not going to applaud herself twice.
That's true. I do that against my will.
I have enough ego for you and for our guest and for Jen.
Mm-hmm. That is
correct. Good, because I happen to know our guest personally, and he, considering everything he's achieved in his life, he has more humility than any of us. And no ego, so that's a good thing. But Peter, yes, you make up for the whole station.
Are you referring to humility or humble pie?
Yeah, I think you eat a lot of humble pie, but I don't think you...
I love pie.
Yes, you do love pie. I've sat with you at many a diner. I know you love pie. Okay, so we're going off the rails and we haven't even gotten started. So let's pull it back. All right, our other E's are absolutely for our experts. And that, again, no exception for today. And we've talked about vowels and consonants, and we have a writer with us today that is going to really help sort things out for us. But our experts are really what drives the Ask Brien radio show, because they have a minimum of 10,000 hours in their respective industry or field. And that is, so in most cases, the experts we have on our show have more like 10,000 hours like a week, it seems like, if that was possible. But that mathematical formula, Peter, just for you, because I know you like to put me on the spot with it, we figured that it's calculated based on approximately 40 hours a week over the course of 50-ish weeks. And that would take a person roughly around 5 years to get that expert status. But once again, our experts have really just jumped in, especially with startups, and have invested way more than that number of hours just getting their businesses off the ground. And we're here to educate you so that you can shortcut that learning curve, because our experts have such amazing insights on how to do things, and you can learn from the lessons that they've learned. And that's very, I'm very enthusiastic about what our experts can do for the educational side of entrepreneurship. Whew! How about you, Peter?
I'm excited!
Okay,
Sure.
we got it. You're excited. We got it.
I
It
want to make
doesn't-
sure that nobody has any more ears.
It doesn't really have the
Yes.
same effect, though, when you're not in studio trying to destroy this poor microphone. So I guess that's
Okay,
probably a good thing.
Jen, please don't encourage him, if you don't mind.
Apologies, Tracy.
Well, listen, if I'm not in the studio breaking the glass because I'm so loud, I'm not doing my job.
That's true.
Yeah. You're good. You're all good. You're Okay, so we've talked education, we've talked experts, we've talked excitement, we've talked empathy. What else can we do before we bring on our fabulous guests today, Peter?
Well, we do have other things, but I do want to get into the show because we have had a longer intake first. So I just want to say that Tracy, this will be her last show as a regular co-host. I wanted to applaud her and thank her for that. So that's one thing. And then secondly, I know that she loves that play, that movie, Grease, and they have that thing, and something about Grease lightning is what?
Electrifying, and so are we. And just so you know, in case everybody's heartbroken that they think I won't be back, I'll be back. I'll just be back, just not as frequently. So you're not getting rid of me, Peter. Don't even try to act like you're getting rid of me, because you're not.
All right. So now, if Chris is like going, what did I get myself into? I never heard of such a thing. If I knew it was like this, I wouldn't be here. But is Chris still there?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Welcome, Chris Gates. Welcome to the show, Chris Gates.
We
Thank
do
you
like
for
to have
having
fun.
me.
We do have fun if you can't figure that out. All right, but on a serious, people don't know who you are. So first, as an introduction, people don't really know who you are. So first, I'd like to get kind of a little introduction. There's some areas that we've already decided that we're going to talk about, but I'd like to quickly let the audience have a background of who you are, and so that they know who they're talking.
Okay, sure. So I was a chemistry major and a chemist for 30 years in industry at nuclear power plants and other nuclear facilities, who dreamed of being a writer. And so I kept a journal for a long time. I wrote short stories, didn't show them to anybody. And in 2000, I wrote a short story about my grandfather who had passed away, and just put it out on a printer and gave it away at my family reunion. And was a little shy about it, wasn't sure if I was really good or not. I kind of thought I was onto something, but my family just had a fit over it. And said, you have got to get this published. So I didn't have any idea how to go about getting something published. This was before everything was electronic. You had to still submit stories on hard copy. But I won't belabor the story because there's a lot of detail to it. But the first magazine I submitted that story to bought it for $200 and made it the centerfold article of their 30th anniversary edition with 2 pages of beautiful artwork. And when they sent me 10 copies of the magazine and a $200 check with that. And when I opened it up, I had the check in my hand and I saw that artwork. I really had the bug. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a professional writer. So from there, I kept writing stories and articles, ended up publishing around 150 different stories and articles. And it became kind of like fishing. I was like, well, let me see what else I can catch. So I wrote some technical articles in my field of chemistry and trade journals. I wanted to see if I could get published on an academic level, was able to successfully do that. And then I wrote a political thriller. I wrote my first novel in 2005. My second novel was a political thriller. And my publisher went bankrupt. And so I ended up, as a settlement, they gave me all the books. So I ended up with 5,000 copies of my own book in my garage. And I was like, I've got to find a way to sell these books. So I started a political column in my local paper. I really just taught the local newspaper editor into letting me write a political column, even though I'd never done it before. And I strictly did it so I could have the byline, political writer Chris Gates also wrote this political thriller and da-da-da, and you can buy it here. And the political column ended up taking on a life of its own. And ultimately, I was appointed as a speechwriter for the governor of Kentucky. And then I was later appointed to the Trump administration, where I wrote a speech for the vice president and the president.
Well, that's quite a jump from how did you get to the governor's office?
I was going to write a political column. I needed a column every week, and I was like, gosh, what am I going to write about this week? And the guy that was running for governor was coming to my local community. And I had kind of followed his career and found him a very interesting person. So I called his campaign and asked him if I could interview him for a column. And they kind of blew me off at first. But by then, my column had gotten picked up nationally by a number of websites. I forgot to tell you that part. And so I sent some of the links to him. I said, hey, I'm published here, here, and here. You may not want to blow me off. And so they got me the interview. And so they said, okay, you've got 15 minutes with the candidate because he's got multiple other stops he has to go to. And so we were supposed to talk for 15 minutes. We ended up talking for 3 hours. We just hit it off. We connected on a number of levels. And we ended up exchanging personal phone numbers. And then I ended up helping him with his campaign on some technical matters related to my field. And so ultimately, he appointed me as his energy advisor / speechwriter. It was a really interesting couple of hats I wore there.
Now, in energy, you mentioned that you're a chemist and that you work with nuclear energy. But energy encompasses oil and gas, and I guess to a certain extent, solar, wind, and anything, electric, whatever. So how does, as an energy person, I would think that you're limited just to nuclear from your background. How did you learn about the other areas?
That's a great question. So the way that chemistry interfaces with power generation is in the water and the steam. So the water chemistry in a nuclear reactor or in an industrial boiler is critically important because industrial boilers operate at very high temperature, around 1,000 degrees, very high pressure, anywhere from 2,000 pounds per square inch to 3,500 pounds per square inch. At that temperature and pressure, you cannot tolerate impurities in the water that turns the turbine. So the water chemistry was my main focus and my main expertise. So I ended up working in nuclear. I worked in coal plants. I worked in a gas plant because it didn't matter what the fuel was. Ultimately, they all were going to create steam and turn a turbine. So the chemistry translated to all of them. And also, I became an expert in environmental chemistry, and you have to have environmental compliance no matter what your fuel source is. So that's how I got a real broad-based exposure to different types of energy production.
So what are the differences between, I know that, writing a short story, 10, 20, 30 pages, and writing a column, where obviously it's not more on a daily basis, that's completely different to me than writing a novel. Because to me, a novel has to be a lot more planned out, outlined, and, to have chapters, et cetera, et cetera. What do you feel is the difference between, because one person might be able to write a newspaper column, one person might be able to write, a short story, but to get into a novel, I would think that it's got to be a lot longer and a lot more planning involved. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that's, you're making a very good point. And then still another type of writing that I did a lot of is speech writing, which is very different than all the other ones you described. But you're exactly right. And I guess I'm just blessed in being a storyteller. One of the things that created my writing ability is I moved 43 times as a kid. So I was constantly the new kid. And so I began to tell stories like at recess, at lunch, anything I could do to entertain, to try to make new friends. And it just became really natural to me. So if I know what my word count is, I've kind of got a little bit of an innate ability to say, okay, I can tell this story about this topic in this amount of space. And, I don't just sit there and write it out. It's a craft. You write it and you rewrite it and you rewrite it till you get it correct. But I can adjust my expectation and my goal for what I want to write. And I can tell you a little bit about the novel writing process if you want to go into that. That's a little bit interesting.
We can go into that a little bit. I mean, we have about 3 more minutes before a break, and afterwards we're going to pivot and get into more marketing and those type of concepts.
Okay. With a novel, there's different types of writers. I'm an instinct writer, which is not actually the most prolific kind. I could never write the big things like Meacham did with the Hawaii and the 1,200-page tomes because of my method. But as an instinct writer, if I'm going to write a novel, I get the idea for the novel in a very general terms, and then I just sit down in front of a blank white piece of paper, and I just have to stare at the paper. And sometimes I'll sit there for an hour, and eventually the first few sentences will come out. And a lot of times I'll say, okay, that's totally crap, and throw it away. But other times I'm like, yeah, that's it. This is the direction I want to go. So I'll usually write 30 to 40,000 words by that method before I do a story outline. I have to kind of know a general sense of what the story I want to tell is before I can outline it, which may not be the most efficient method, but it's my method.
Well, whatever method works, right? That's the key.
Yeah, whatever works.
Now, so in 2000, when you wrote that first story, how long was it before you decided to become just a writer as opposed to a chemist? Or when did you give up your chemistry career?
From the time I wrote the first novel, I was seeking to be a full-time writer. I didn't make it until 2016. So it was 16 years before I was willing to let go of my career as a chemist, because actually that was a pretty lucrative career, and I didn't want to short my family, and say, okay, I'm going to cut my income by 75% because I want to chase this dream. So as a guy with kids and a wife and responsibilities, I wanted to be able to do it in a way that I could make it kind of a smooth transition. And that took me a long time to find a role where I could keep the income levels pretty close to the same.
Well, obviously that's a big thing. Now, when you sold the 5,000 books, did you make money off of that?
I did. I didn't make a lot because I was traveling. I was so much shoe leather and so much gas and hotel rooms to sell these books at different places. But I probably did a little bit better than breaking even. I didn't lose. I've never lost money as a writer. I haven't made huge profits yet. Actually, my last 2 years have been my most profitable years by far. But I really want to get it to where it's a full-time income.
Well, unfortunately, we've got to take a quick break. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. What we love about the station, like no other station in the world. We are like no other station in the world.
We are like no other station in the world. Okay, so we are back. There's so many layers to this Chris Skates onion that we're going to peel off here today. And I would love to just know more about how did your speech writing, your writing, how did that morph and transition into being an energy advisor, which ultimately landed you with an appointment under the Trump administration 1.0. So tell me a little bit about that journey.
So I started out as just straight up speech writing and writing the governor's official correspondence. And the Governor Bevin, who I served, was an outstanding writer in his own right. But what a lot of people don't realize is how many times the governor has to speak in a day. They're invited and asked to speak at so many different things and write so many different official correspondence that they couldn't govern if they were doing all their own writing. So it's not like a cop-out on the candidate's part. They all have to have a speechwriter. So my first year and a half in the administration was strictly writing a speech. If he was going to the Chamber of Commerce, I'd write one speech. If he was going to my biggest responsibility to write the State of the Commonwealth address, which is just like the President's State of the Union address, only it's at the state level. And that was about a 6 weeks endeavor to really get that written. And, of course, at first, going from a guy that was a kind of a weekend writer to writing stuff that's being scrutinized by the media and legislature was extremely intimidating. But the first thing I wrote for the governor after I'd only been on the job 4 or 5 days was an op-ed that I did completely of my own volition. I hadn't really been assigned anything yet, and I was like, wow, this is a topic that his voice would really speak to. So I wrote an op-ed in his voice on a topic. Well, it was on the 2016 election because not only did Donald Trump get elected that election, but the Kentucky state legislature flipped from Democrat to Republican for the first time in Kentucky history. So it was sort of a momentous historical moment. So I wrote a column about that, and the governor loved it. The AP picked it up. So they ended up getting more eyeballs on that op-ed, that first op-ed I wrote, than anything that they had done to date, because I was about 6 months into the administration before I got hired. So they had another writer that he had fired for various reasons, but they had never had anything get anywhere near that much traction. So the short version of that is I kind of hit a grand slam home run on my third day on the job. Well, then it kind of got I kind of got on a roll. I wrote the State of the Commonwealth address. I wrote several things that went over great, were very well received. So I began to think, hey, I'm Ernest Hemingway here. But then you end up stepping on a landmine, or you make a mistake in a speech or something, and then you get humility because it is a very highly scrutinized. Whatever a governor says, a lot of people are listening to. But anyway, the governor got appointed during the first 18 months as the chairman of what's called the Southern States Energy Board, which is a creation of the United States Congress, and I won't go into all that detail, but it's a pretty big position. So he came to me, and he said, Chris, I know you spent 30 years in the energy industry, and when you're writing for somebody, by the way, my little office was right next to the governor's office. There was just a door between us. So I probably interacted with him as much as anybody in the administration, and you kind of form a trust relationship. So he said, I've taken on this chairmanship. Can you help me with this energy board in addition to your other duties? Because I know you've got a big energy background, and I'm very passionate about energy policy issues anyway, and I had written a lot of columns on that topic. So I said, sure, I'd be glad to. Well, in the course of doing that, I ended up working with the Department of Energy, the Secretary of Energy's office in D.C. through the Southern States Energy Board. So Governor Bevin did not get reelected, sadly, in 2019, and I was immediately offered a job at the Department of Energy headquarters as my title then was Senior Energy Advisor because we had worked so closely together through the Southern States Energy Board. So here's where it really gets interesting. I'm appointed. It's my first day on the job in D.C. The deputy secretary calls me into his office, and you got to remember 5 years before that, I had been working in a coal-fired power plant. So this was heady stuff for me. So I look over the deputy secretary's shoulder, and I see the Washington Monument, and I'm like, holy smokes, am I really here? And he said, we hear you write good speeches. I said, yeah. He said, the vice president needs a speech on energy in the morning. Get busy. So I don't even have my office supplies yet, and I'm writing a speech on energy for the Vice President of the United States of America, which I did. About 2 weeks later, I'm in an apartment in D.C. I'm about 3 weeks on the job. My wife hasn't moved up yet. She's trying to sell the house back home. My apartment, my furnishings were a lawn chair and an air mattress, and I was eating a box of ramen noodles.
Oh, my goodness.
and my phone rings, and it's a secure number. And when the governor would call me, it was always a secure number, so I thought the governor was calling me, but I was like, wait, he's not the governor anymore. Why would he be calling me on a secure number? So I answered, and they said, this is the White House. Please hold. And I answered, when the guy picked up, and it was the chief speechwriter for the President of the United States. And he said,
my gosh. Did you think it was a prank call?
No, I knew because of the number, the way that it came in, that it was legit. And so he said, we're working on a speech for the president on energy. We wondered if you'd be willing to help us with it. We loved what you did for the vice president. And I said, sure, I'd be glad to. I said, when do you need me to help? And he said, right now. So I set my ramen noodles down, and I sat in a lawn chair in an empty apartment in D.C. and helped write a speech for the President of the United States. So another week goes by. I don't hear anything about it. I don't know. They thanked me profusely. They said I was a big help to them that night. We were on the phone for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours. I called from that same number 2 weeks later. This is the White House. Please hold. The chief speechwriter comes on, and he said, hey, we really liked your speech. We want you to come to the White House for breakfast next Wednesday. So I thanked him. I said, I'll be there. Hung up the phone. I'm dancing in my apartment. And I noticed when I was dancing and jumping around, I kind of got short of breath before I thought I would. So I go back to work. I'm on cloud nine. I tell the people that I report the president wants me to come to the White House for breakfast. That's one cool thing about being in a politically appointed position. When the president tells you to do something, you don't have to ask your direct boss. It's already been approved. So the Friday before the breakfast, I'm coming up the steps of the metro, and I passed out. Everything went black. I didn't know.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Hold on. I think this is a really good time for us to leave us all hanging and take a break for our sponsor, because this story gets really crazy, right?
Yeah.
Well, it is a tiny bit early, but we're going to be taking a quick break. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220, 98.1 FM. And no word from our sponsor.
Well, it's hard to follow a lead up to a story like that. I'll make this quick so we can get to Chris's story. We do want to say
we'll hold it against you.
Yeah, it's
all about the arc of the storytelling, Jen. That's just the way it is.
I love it.
Today.
I love
That's
it.
what he does for a living. That's what he does for a living. So of course he's
exactly. That's why I'm boosting it up so much. And I'm the hype person over here.
This is all part of the plan. I'm impressed. And I'm going to pivot now and talk about legalsteps.com. It's spelled LEGALSTEPZ. That's with a Z.com. So you're thinking, okay, 2025 is my year. I'm finally going to do this. I've been told for however many months, maybe years, that I should start my own business. I have a really unique idea. I have something that I think the public would want. And now it's my turn. It's my turn to finally get out there and start my own business. But I don't know how. Well, the kind folks at legalsteps.com can help you do that. And it's really pretty simple. All courses are quite affordable. All fall under $150. So that's, in the grand scheme of things, that's not that much money, especially if you're talking about your future, your plans that you've had for so long. These courses very affordable. You can, the courses are, register for a trademark, learn how to form an S corporation, and form an LLC. Now, I took one of these courses a little while ago, probably early last year, and just to kind of get a feel for what I was talking about. And I was able to complete the course in less than 2 hours. I could work at my own pace, which is huge, I think, for everybody. You obviously have other things going on in your life, and you certainly don't want to have to worry about someone else's schedule. So you can work at your own pace. You can pause it, rewind it. I was able to pause it and take notes. And the other thing that I really like too, so that you know you're doing the right thing, you know you're following along properly and answering the questions the right way, they offer a screen in screen. So like a picture in picture, you can kind of see what your legal expert is looking at themselves, and they're guiding you through the process. So then you go, oh, okay, cool. I answered that question the right way because that's what my legal expert is telling me to do. These legal experts have over 30 years experience, so you know that you're in good hands. And if you get stuck, if you're confused and this legalese is taking over your brain, they'll just do it for you. So it's really, there's no bad situation, no bad outcome for any of this. Again, legalsteps.com, legalstepz.com.
Okay.
So you passed out, Chris.
Okay.
Well, no,
Okay.
because we have to go back to the S. Brien Show. Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.
We'll go back to the S. Brien Show.
You're welcome.
On KHTS 1220, 98.1 FM. Now you
Okay, my goodness, we're just talking all over our format today. All right, so we're on the edge of our seat. So you were dancing around with your lawn chair ramen noodle apartment in D.C. You felt a little short of breath, but you got a call from the president. He wanted you to come to breakfast and then go from there.
So it was 2 days later after the dancing that I was coming up the metro steps, and because I had been short of breath, I was trying to do all this cardio. I was like, I'm getting out of shape. I got to really push myself. So I took the stairs instead of the escalator, and when I got to the top of the stairs, I went out cold. A stranger helped me up. I regained consciousness, and I was like, gosh, maybe I should see a doctor or something. So I first went to a walk clinic. I won't go into all the details, but over the next 3 days, I saw a couple of different doctors, and then I went to an internal medicine specialist. I actually had to call a friend of the governor because I didn't know any doctors in D.C., but the governor had friends in D.C., and they told me to go to this one guy. Well, that guy really saved my life because he looked at me and he said, I think you may have something a little more serious than you're thinking. He said, I want you to go see a friend of mine. He's the best in the world at diagnosing blood disorders. So I called my wife. This was Monday. The breakfast was Wednesday. And I said, listen, they want me to go see a blood doctor. I said, they're overreacting. I'm fine. Don't even worry about it. Well, she said when she hung up the phone, she felt like God told her, no, worry about it. You need to get to D.C. right now. So she got an emergency flight to D.C. When I got up the next morning to go to the doctor, to the blood doctor, she called me from Reagan International Airport. She said, hey, I'm at Reagan. Pick me up on your way to the doctor. I'm going with you. So I swing by there, pick her up. I see the doctor. He's a specialist who's associated with Johns Hopkins, which is a very important detail in Baltimore. They do some blood work, and he comes in, and he's like pale himself. And he said, Mr. Skates, I don't know how to tell you this, but he said, you have acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And I was real cavalier and macho about it. I was like, okay, no problem. I said, I'll beat it. I said, but listen, I got to go to breakfast at the day after tomorrow. So I'm going to go do that, and then I'll come back Thursday, and you can give me whatever the pills are or whatever I got to take. And he grabbed me by the shoulders, and he said, Mr. Skates, you're not hearing me. He said, I cannot explain medically why you're alive right now. Almost all your red blood cells have been destroyed by cancer. He said, there will be no breakfast at the White House. We're not starting chemo after you get back Thursday. We're starting chemo in 15 minutes.
Oh,
and he
my.
said, trying to defeat this disease will dominate the next 2 years of your life. And then later they did genetic testing on the cancer and found out it was the most deadly form of leukemia in the world, and they gave me a 2% chance of survival.
A 2% chance of survival?
2. And here I am. 5 years later, I'm fully cured. I beat it during the COVID pandemic. It's an absolute miracle. I'm a walking miracle. But
Wow.
One of the things I promised myself while I was sick was I had written a manuscript that I had never gotten to get published, and it's probably my favorite one. It's the story of my grandfather, who was a very beloved person in my life. My grandfather was a revenue agent back in the 30s and 40s. Those are the guys that bust up moonshine stills. I apologize. I think one of my other phones is ringing. And so I wanted to tell a story about a murder investigation that he conducted where in 1946, where a moonshiner murdered my grandfather's informant. And so I had written that story, and I said, if I can survive this cancer, I'm going to get this story published because it's just too good a story not to be told. And so after I got through all my chemo, I did a bone marrow transplant. I was in and out of the hospital for about 12 months and was on full disability. I had to leave my job with the administration and go on disability. But I did publish that book, and I'm back working as a contractor for the Department of Energy now on my full-time job, but I'm still telling stories. I'll have a new book coming out this month, and it's just amazing. It really is. Even as I'm retelling it to you now, it's almost overwhelming. I almost get choked up that I've been able to get back to writing, back to storytelling, and back to close to full health.
Wow. Well, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. Tracy?
Yes, so Chris, you are an amazing storyteller. I can't even imagine how great your new book is. It's titled Moonshine Over Georgia. Please tell our audience today how they can get a hold of this book.
Yeah, it's on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, or audiobook. I love for people to read my writing, but I'm so thrilled with the actor that I hired to read the audiobook. The story is told through the first-person account of my grandfather, and so I was really selective about who I chose to play my own grandfather. And Gary Brugosi was the guy that did it. He's a great voice actor, does a lot of voiceover work for your industry, radio, but also does some movie trailers. So he's the narrator, but the story is just so rich. The real people that were involved are just amazing in their own right. So being able to base my fictional characters, and this is fiction based on actual events, was just a gift. The story itself was actually made into a feature film in the late 70s. Andy Griffith, of all people, played the murderer, John Wallace, and Johnny Cash played the sheriff. But the movie yeah, you can find that movie on YouTube for free. It's called Murder in Coweta County. But the movie makers really left a huge bit of detail out of the story that's incredibly interesting, that really only my grandfather knew because he was the lead investigator on the moonshine aspect of the case. And so my story is about that, some of his face-to-face meetings with the killer, John Wallace, that really happened. And it's just it was an amazing ride. I was actually doing a book signing down in Georgia just a few weeks ago, and I had a African-American lady come up to me and hug me, and she was crying. And she said that she knew a lot of the people that were involved and some people that were victimized by this guy. And she said, "You're the first person who really told their story." And it was really moving for me that I connected with her over something that happened 70 years ago.
Oh, that is incredible. I feel like a Netflix documentary is in the works. But all right.
I would love that.
Okay, so I know that people would just, aspiring writers, people who are just curious, just wanting to continue this conversation with you. What is the best way for people to get in touch with you, Chris?
I'm on Twitter at Chris Skates 81. Facebook is probably the most effective way. Chris Skates, I'm very easy to find. I'm not hiding. And then my books are on Amazon under Chris Skates author, or if you just search on Moonshine Over Georgia, all of my books will come up. I have 4 out. I'll soon have my 5th book out.
That's amazing. Well, of course, everyone, you can check out, if you want to re-listen to all these just fabulous stories that Chris has shared with us, you can check out Ask Brien, the podcast. And that's wherever you find your podcast on all the listening platforms. And links to get in touch with Chris, but most importantly, to get your hands on the printed or audiobook version of Moonshine Over Georgia. The links will be in the show notes for the podcast, and we encourage you to check it out and get that book and just stay in touch with Chris because he's got more stories I can tell. Right, Peter?
We're just getting warmed up.
You're just getting started.
All right. So, first of all, did you tell them where you can find our podcast, Trees?
Yes, I did, because that's what I do. I told them they could find it on all the listening platforms, wherever they listen to their favorite platforms.
I didn't hear iTunes or any
Apple, Spotify, iHeart, you name it, we're there. Go find us. Ask Brien, the podcast.
So, if I was an aspiring writer and I wanted to write, and I wrote a book, what would you say? Would you say try to self-publish it? Would you say try to find a publisher? And how hard is that to do if you're an aspiring writer?
The way things are now in 2025, I am going to stay with self-publishing because the publishing world for especially a new writer is really a hamster wheel. Sorry, it just is. You end up going, I used to go to all these writers' conferences and try to get an agent, and try to get signed, and try to do this, and try to do that. And you end up submitting your manuscript to an editor or an editor's assistant, and then you don't get to hear no for 12 months. They just sit on it. And they've got so many manuscripts coming in, they may or may not ever get back to you. So you're in limbo all that time. Do people still get big book deals? Yeah, but it's really the exception, not the rule. And self-publishing now is so much better. I have really seen the whole learning curve of self-publishing because I self-published my first book in 2005. Then I had a traditional publishing deal on the other book I told you about in about 2010. And then I went back to self-publishing, and I've self-published my last 2, and it's just infinitely better than it used to be. Your book is much more professional looking if you put in the time and effort on that part of it. And you get a lot more of your every book sale. You get more coming back to you as an author than you're going to probably get with a traditional publisher. Now, if you could get a big book deal and have a traditional publisher's muscle behind you, that would be different. But that's not the way it works anymore. The traditional publishers spend 98% of their effort on 5% of their authors. So if you're in a publishing house with a guy like, say, David Baldacci, they're not going to spend any time marketing your book for you, newcomer author. They're going to market David Baldacci's books, who sold millions of books. And I don't really blame them. So even when I had my traditional publishing deal, even before they went bankrupt, you were pretty much responsible for all your own shoe leather, all your own promotions. So if you're going to have to promote yourself anyway, you may as well be the publisher.
I think it's always better to be the publisher, right? It's like, do you want to be the owner or the employee? You always want to be the owner if you have a choice.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the hour. You've been listening to the Ask Brien radio show. We had a great time today. It was Tracy's last show, although she will be coming in as a guest co-host once a month hereafter. But as far as coming on a weekly basis, she won't be available on a weekly basis. We wish her the best. Chris, thank you very much for your time. I will have you back on again to get more. And you're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220, 98.1 FM. Over and out.